so years, and more aggressively the last. So a second agent. So two, okay, my left, and in fairness to them. Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to the very first episode of Deconstructing the Matrix. So let's get the formalities out of the way. Why did I make this channel? Well, the reason is because I have become aware that as a result of the divisions and the things that have transpired over the last 6 or so years, and more aggressively the last 3 years, with respect to how we see each other, how we treat each other, and how we think, our way of life can go bye-bye way more easily than people believe. And we're just making it easier because although we do have power in this game, there are lots of people pulling strings. And while we're sitting here bickering amongst ourselves about minutia, we are sending ourselves further into the wormhole of really the Matrix. As a result, we've become less discerning and less able to tell fact from fiction. After years of trying to figure out what the hell's going on, I have come to some conclusions. The first of those conclusions being, if we do not evolve the way we think, and I don't mean change, I mean actually evolve the way we think, I believe that our way of life will disappear a lot faster than we want it to. And by evolve, I mean fundamentally change, right? Right now, we are stuck into a two-dimensional thought process that is just making it easier and easier for us to be controlled. And we'll get into those who are controlling us later in this episode and in subsequent episodes. The second, we are absolutely in a matrix of sorts. And I referenced that movie because that movie is revolutionary in a bunch of ways. But one way is philosophically. And it's a good guide to help us understand the things that we're dealing with here in today's society. And by matrix, I mean there are forces that have control of some levers of our existence that are willfully wanting us to be distracted and ill-informed about the reality of things so that they can keep that control. That's kind of a general idea of what I mean about the matrix and those agents and elements that are involved in that matrix. Now, here's another conclusion I've come to. It's not the matrix's fault that we are where we are. It's our fault. Yeah, don't look around. It's your fault. It's my fault. It's all of our faults because it's a lot easier for us to think in a way that makes us emotionally satisfied as opposed to really trying to seek the truth. It takes a lot of energy to seek the truth. But if we don't, like Snoop said in his Corona commercial, down the rabbit hole we all go. Yeah, because the less informed you stay, the less control you have over your existence. So really, the causes of our current informations have nothing to do with religion or race or politics. It has more to do with who's controlling the resources and who people blame for those resources going away. That's really the bottom line. And if we don't get a better understanding and quit blaming each other, as opposed to the actual agents controlling things, then we will go down that rabbit hole. Now, in this podcast, basically every episode will have a main theme, and then we'll have people on each side of the discussion, and then we'll kind of explain the reality of those, right? As the old adage goes, there's one side, and then there's the other side, and then there's the truth. And that's really the objective of this podcast, to get us closer to truth so that we can keep our democracy going. Now, I know our democracy is not perfect, and it's not the same for everybody, right? Even today, it's not an equal distribution of democracy. I get that. But my more urgent concern is that this can all go away super quickly. We can go by the way of Nazi Germany. We can go by way of Timbuktu. We can go by way of Napoleon. There's a lot of ways we can go, and most of them are bad at this particular point if we do not evolve the way we think. Now, what are the goals of this channel? The first goal is to really have us come back together and keep the union together. That's really the ultimate goal. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, one way is really kind of illuminating people and helping name the players, right? And by players, I mean the people who are kind of controlling the levers of power in the matrix.
Hello, Neo.
Who are you?
I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
Now, I kind of have like several layers of players. One level and the highest level of controllers is called the mainframe. And those are the people that are controlling the controllers, right? Now, a lot of people have theories. We call them conspiracy theories about certain entities that are controlling things. I'm not going there yet. I'm not going there today. But there are entities that have sway and major control over our existence. Those are what I call the mainframes. And then the second level is the managers. Those are the larger agents that the mainframes use to keep control in the way that they like it. Okay, and we'll get into who those people are. And then we have the agents. Those are the individuals or the small groups who go out and actively do it. Those are the people you can kind of see, just like in the movie in the Matrix. Those are the people that you see going out and actively keeping us blind, deaf, and dumb, and susceptible to the controls of the levers of power. And then you have members of the resistance. Those are the people who are really actively trying to illuminate us. Now, some of those people who claim to be members of the resistance are actually a detriment because they're not really giving you the truth. They're giving you unfounded theory after unfounded theory. And I'm not anti-conspiracy. Those things are happening all the time. What I am is anti-unfounded conspiracy that just makes us dumber and puts us more at odds with each other, right? Especially some of these latest conspiracies that are just making us bicker amongst ourselves for scraps when the people who control the matrix want us to stay in that mind frame. Then another goal of this podcast is to find possible solutions, right? The first thing really is to evolve how we think. Let's move ourselves out of a two-dimensional thought process to a more evolved three-dimensional thought process, and on and on. The world doesn't exist in 2 dimensions. The world exists in 4 or 5 dimensions. Now, we play in 3 dimensions. The world operates probably in 4 dimensions. And the 5th dimension is kind of the dimension that we don't understand yet, right? So we'll explain what I mean by all those dimensions going forward in subsequent episodes as well. Another way to solve things is, for people to really attempt to understand other people's point of view. Another solution is to just bring each other together by other means. Eliminating the two-party system would be the number one, in my opinion. But we can talk about that. And any suggestion you have, put in the comments section. And if you like what we're doing, always hit the subscribe and the like button if you can. Okay. Another solution is really to convince people to have respect for their own brains, man. You gotta respect your own brain. Don't just put a bunch of crap in there that just because it feels good, right? I mean, that's what we're doing with this left stuff and right stuff, or this conservative and liberal stuff, or this, atheist and religion stuff. I mean, those are important things to kind of ferret out in fact. But a lot of it is just about what makes you feel good. It's like feeding your body candy all day long. It feels great. It tastes good. But eventually you're going to die as a result of it, right? So, and that's what we're doing. We're killing our brains because we're putting in what just feels good as opposed to what's going to help us evolve and survive. And then ultimately we want to eliminate the controllers of the matrix, the control mechanisms, the way they control us. And in subsequent episodes, we will go through those. Okay. So once again, please hit the like and subscribe button if you like the content and are interested. Okay. So like I mentioned, every episode will have a central theme. Okay. Today's central theme will be, what is the greatest threat to American democracy? And as we all know, there is this side to the argument, there's this side to the argument, and then there's the truth, right? So today we're going to kind of go over this side of the argument, that side of the argument, and then kind of ferret out the truth if we can, as well as we can. And here's the thing. This is an interactive thing. I don't think I know everything. I think one thing that my father has given me is the gift of perspective, and not to be so easily swayed by one way or the other, to try and understand the reality of the situation regardless of how it makes me feel. So maybe that is the greatest gift I have to offer anybody. So that's where we're going. Now, we will show some videos of people on the left first discussing what they think are the biggest threats to American democracy. So first will be Kamala Harris. Let me get her name right. Kamala Harris discussing her biggest threat to American democracy.
You asked before, what is the greatest national security threat to the United States? It's Donald Trump. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I agree, climate change represents an existential threat. He denies the science. You want to talk about North Korea, real threat in terms of nuclear arsenal, but what does he do? He embraces Kim Jong-un, a dictator for the sake of a photo op. Putin, you want to talk about
Senator
Russia?
Harris, we're going to
he takes the word of the Russian president over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to a threat to our democracy and our elections.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
These are the issues that are before us, Chuck.
I hear you.
Next, we will have Governor Whitmer of Michigan, and what she thinks is the greatest threat to American democracy.
My personal opinion was that this administration has been reckless and not particularly well informed. I've never believed that they read all the briefings that they're supposed to read, but it's a whole nother thing to be reckless or ignorant and to be deceptive and to have American lives lost because of it. They knew, they didn't tell us. And I think the biggest enemy of the state right now is the misinformation that's coming out of the head of state. I think the biggest threat to the American people is the American president right now.
Next, we'll have Roland Martin, who is a left pundit, political pundit, He's been a contributor on political shows. Let's see what he thinks the greatest threat to American democracy is.
Joining me to talk about this a little more is Roland Martin. He's the host and managing editor of News One. Now, Roland, most secretaries of state, most politicians, and you have said to me that the problem in this country with voting is too little of it, not too much of it. We don't actually have a problem with a whole lot of dead people voting or people voting in multiple states. Best I can come up with is a handful of examples, per election. What is this about?
Oh, this is about pure politics. Russia is not the greatest threat to democracy in America. It is the Republican Party. I got lots of friends who are Republicans, lots of folks who are Democrats. I don't align with any party. But when you look at what Republicans are doing, not just with this commission, but what they have done over the last 10 years, it is clear voter suppression. You have Dale.
Now we'll have Tucker Carlson and what he thinks the greatest threat to American democracy is. As you all know, he's a conservative pundit, and he has the most watched show on Fox, if I'm not mistaken. Let's hear what he has to say about the biggest threat to American democracy.
Last week in the Wall Street Journal, there was a kind of remarkable op-ed stating as clearly as anyone has ever stated the nature of the threat that we face from China. The op-ed was written by someone who would know, the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe. He called the Communist Party of China, quote, the greatest threat to democracy and freedom worldwide since World War II.
And then there's Donald Trump. He is the former Republican president who is currently, I guess he's a right winger. I don't know really what he is because he's not really right or left. But for the purposes of this argument, let's see what he says is the biggest threat to American democracy.
Here's the tweet in which Donald Trump officially announced the media is the biggest threat to our country. So funny to watch the fake news, especially NBC and CNN. They're fighting hard to downplay the deal with North Korea. 500 days ago, they would have begged for this deal. Looked like war would break out. Our country's biggest enemy is the fake news so easily promulgated by fools.
Now we have the Voice of America, which is a government-funded think tank of educators and researchers whose objective, and I think, in my opinion, they have a fairly neutral ideology, and really their objective is kind of coming to some understanding using statistics and research to develop information about the populace. So let's see what they have to say about the biggest threats to American democracy.
In its annual report, the renowned watchdog Freedom House is warning that democracy is on the retreat worldwide and singles out the United States as a major concern. The current freedom rating puts American democracy on a level with Greece, Croatia, and Mongolia, but well below other democracies such as Germany, France, and Britain. Sarah Rapucci of Freedom House says core institutions are under assault.
And our biggest concerns are attacks on the judiciary, demonization of the press, corruption and conflicts of interest, and also attacks on the legitimacy of our election.
The White House declined to comment for this story.
There are other people, right? There's people who think that there are things like the one world order out there. You know, kind of reminds me of a Star Wars episode, but I'm not downplaying it because there are absolutely elements that make that a valid thought process. It's just a little nebulous, right? But some people think the one world order is the biggest threat to American democracy. And then through all that, we will try and figure out some reality as I see it. And then it's your job to keep me straight, right? Tell me what you think. Thumbs down, thumbs up, whatever. I'm not here to demonize people. I just want to help us understand better than we understand at this point, in my opinion. So there we go. Okay. So let's go back to Donald Trump. Okay. His opinion is that the media is the biggest threat to American democracy in that clip, right? I mean, he said everything under the sun subsequently and before that, but let's just talk about that particular clip, right? The media. Okay. So here is the reality of the media. The media recently, let's say over the last 30 years, has been traditionally left-leaning. We all can agree on that, whatever that means. But the reality of the media is us, because all people in media, guess what? They want to make money, and they will not put things on that people aren't watching. So since the 60s, when really all media was largely conservative, meaning they worked as part of agencies with the CIA to keep things under wraps. So relatively, since the 60s, all media was relatively relatively conservative. Now, I know that the Washington Post broke some stories, but that was more fact-finding stuff versus left-leaning, even though some of it was anti-war. There was a lot of stuff going on that was dirty that the media saved us from. So at that time, it was relatively conservative. But since then, it got more left-leaning. And then there was an opening for a lot of right-wing pundits who felt like their voices weren't heard. Rush Limbaugh being the most prominent pioneer of that. And then you have people like Larry Elder who kind of jumped into the black conservative void, and so on and so forth, right? But here's the bottom line. The media is not the enemy. The media is us, because guess what? If nobody watches it, it's not going on the air. So the only way that left media and right media becomes prominent is if people are watching. Yeah, that's you. If you're watching it, it will be put on. If nobody watched quote unquote left-leaning media, it wouldn't be on television. And if nobody watched right-wing media, Fox News is the biggest cable news network at this particular time. Well, it was before Trump denounced them and some of his people moved. So I don't know what the numbers are now. But the point is that the media is actually a reflection of us. It is not a wing of control. It's not the biggest threat to American democracy, because oftentimes media is what saves democracy. So I think that is invalid. Okay, let's move on to China. As a result of what Tucker Carlson has to say. So China is a very, very interesting thing. And as a threat to America, as a geopolitical foe, I think absolutely by a long shot, China is our biggest threat. China, my father has made me aware of how big a threat China is, because he spends most of his time researching that threat. So I am exquisitely aware of the threat that China is as a geopolitical foe. But we also have other geopolitical foes that are threats. None of them nearly as big.
Matt, but
no pressure, Matt.
I think that we have to say that that the party is obsessed with control, right? And I think this is really important to understand what explains the behavior of the Chinese Communist Party leadership. And I believe that they are driven mainly by fear of chaos, fear of losing the party's exclusive grip on power. And what that drives is a whole range of activities and behavior internally to stifle human freedom, to build the firewall higher and higher, to engage in genocide in Xinjiang, to mobilize people's social and family networks against them, to police the people's thoughts.
This is Fiery Cross Island. It's a little more than 1 square mile in size, and it's home to a Chinese military base. There's a 10,000-foot airstrip, an advanced radar station, a missile defense system, and about 200 troops. But the strangest thing about Fiery Cross Island is that 2 years ago, it didn't exist. And neither did the 6 other Chinese military bases that have been built on man-made islands in the South China Sea. If you look at this satellite image from 2014, you can see huge Chinese ships collecting around remote reefs in the Spratly Islands, an archipelago in the South China Sea. In this image, these ships are rapidly pumping sand and rock up onto the reef. They're building islands. And less than a year later, the Chinese had seaports, air bases, and buildings on their new island, and the world had taken notice.
Check power of tech giants is a problem. So are the brazen attempts of China to control the narrative. It runs state-sponsored disinformation campaigns. China has built a propaganda machine. We've reported extensively on how much money they spend worldwide on propaganda. Tonight we'll focus on Facebook and Twitter, 2 social media giants banned in China but not necessarily free of China's influence. In 2016, the Chinese began creating fake accounts to interfere with online political debates in America. They tried to meddle in conversations on issues ranging from the South China Sea to American politics. A Chinese language page called Things About Taiwan Strait was created. First, it started posting innocuous content like panda videos. Then another page came up, one that quote-unquote touted China's power and attacked Taiwan's president, Tsai Ing-wen. She was elected in the same year. By 2018, the same Chinese social media network had built new pages. These were about Chinese naval activities in the South China Sea. The posts defended China and criticized the United States. These pages reportedly had thousands of followers. 4 years later, Facebook woke up to what was happening on the platform. In 2020, it took down more than 100 accounts.
But my philosophy is it's like a house. If you have a household that is tight-knit and close and has each other's backs, even though there's going to be some arguments, then there's no outside households or outside forces that are going to be able to break that house apart. So China as a threat is a very significant threat based on a lot of things that they're doing militarily, technologically, and with respect to economics. But my thought is that if we keep our house straight, China won't even be able to do what they're trying to do. Okay? So, basically on the left, most of their thoughts about what are the biggest threats to American democracy revolve around what Trump has done. So the first thing I say to that is he is out of office. And we are in more danger of dissolving as a union now that he's out of office than when he was in office. Now, he was definitely a catalyst for the demolition of American democracy, I should say. But that's because of the largely illegal things he did and what the Voice of America said. So although Trump played a role, he's not the reason. The reasons were around before Trump showed up, and they're even more significant after Trump leaves because we play a large role in that. Now, what the Voice of America had to say, mostly I think is accurate with respect to when you degrade our media and you label them as the enemy, that degrades our democracy because, like I said, the media largely holds the people and will in the future hold the people who are pulling the strings accountable. Whether you think some media is right, some media is left, okay. But the bottom line is the media serves a very important function in an American democracy. Another thing they said, if you're palling around with dictators and making them a focal point and putting them on a pedestal, then it makes it look like democracy in the eyes of the world is a less effective way to do things. And then there's blatant corruption. You know, I mean, I don't know how you feel about Trump, but one thing you have to say is there was more blatant corruption through this administration than we've ever seen in any administration. You know, I know that people think that the FBI and all these agencies are corrupt, and you know, there's corruption everywhere. But the point is that there was blatant corruption at the highest levels of our government that everybody saw, and that also degrades American democracy. So I think a lot of those things are true, but none of them are the biggest threat to American democracy. The biggest threat to American democracy is us.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
By choosing to remain willfully ignorant, and yes, it's a choice, we pose the biggest threat to American democracy because we make it easier for outside forces to control us. If you are staunchly right or staunchly left, it's easy for outside forces to send whatever they want to whatever website you traffic and tell you what you want to hear or tell you what they want you to hear. Makes it easy to control your minds. And as divided as we are, and we are as divided as we've ever been, probably since the Civil War, divided we fall. And we are in some trouble. So these are the ways that you make it clear that you are the greatest threat to American democracy. You are the greatest threat to American democracy if you choose to keep yourself in a two-dimensional thought process where this group is bad or this group is good. Those right-wingers are mean and want to keep people down and keep people away from the American dream, whereas the lefties are nice and good and want everything that's right for the world. And it doesn't work like that. The world is gray, and it doesn't work. You have to trust your brain enough or love your brain enough to give it the full picture of reality, none of which is black and white. We exist in gray, and there's layers to this, and you have to be willing to do the work to know something. Otherwise, we are doomed to fail. You know, if it's easy for you, if you're stuck in two-dimensional thinking, to believe stuff that's just unbelievable, or to choose to accept things and then let other things go, right? There's one thing, there's a conspiracy out there about the Clintons, right? They run this pedophile ring, and Bill Clinton hangs out with Jeffrey Epstein, or used to hang out with Jeffrey Epstein. As you well know, he is dear departed, likely at the hands of some groups. But I digress. But the Clintons ran, Hillary ran this pedophile ring out of a pizza parlor somewhere. Okay. But really, a lot of that had to do with Bill Clinton palling around with Jeffrey Epstein on his plane going to his island, which I believe Bill was likely doing his thing. But guess who else was doing this thing? Donald Trump. There is easily verifiable evidence that Donald Trump had a significantly close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, that he's been on that plane, that he's been to many, many social events together. As a matter of fact, there's more pictures out there of Trump with Epstein than Clinton. I'm not saying who was there more. I'm just saying that they both were doing their thing. But somehow, Donald Trump gets completely absolved of all of that Even though after Ghislaine Maxwell got arrested, he not only praised her, but wished her well without regard for the victims of the child pornography or the child pedophile ring. He just said, hey, I wish her the best, which tells me that there's something in it for him, not to say anything bad about her. So both of those guys were involved with Jeffrey Epstein to the highest level. But if you engage in two-dimensional thinking, you will be stuck thinking one or the other is true. You are the biggest threat to American democracy if you find yourself thinking dramatically or diametrically opposed to the way you thought just 6 or 5 years ago. Now, I get that the world has changed and things have happened differently, but the world is not that black and white. Nothing is that black and white to make you think, oh, I used to vote Democrat 100% and watch MSNBC all the time and you know, I love spreading the wealth and yada yada yada, and all of a sudden 6 years later you think the Democrats are evil, the embodiment of the devil on earth, and all you watch is OAN and Fox News and Tucker Carlson and the like, and you hate the Democrats. Well, guess what? You got to realize there's something wrong with that way of thinking. And if that's the case, then you are more susceptible than most of us. Okay? Because that's another example of two-dimensional thinking that makes you operate in a way which you were just so ignorant, it's scary. You are the greatest threat to American democracy if you say you have principles, or used to say you have principles, and then you systematically watch the person or people you support go around and destroy all of those principles on a daily basis or on a regular basis, and you say nothing. If you do that, and if you have done that, then you are the greatest threat to American democracy, because you allow your desires to supersede whatever America wants. And the only reason you're doing that is because somebody's telling you a couple things that you want to hear, when you're allowing the fall of the American democracy happen right before our eyes. You are also the greatest threat to American democracy if you are willing to compromise border security, just because you know the demographics of the nation are changing and it's going to help your voting bloc in the future to change the demographics and to change things. But unfortunately, safety is the most important thing that we have to protect in American democracy. And if you are willing to give that up just to have a change in demographics, you are a threat to American democracy. You are the greatest threat to American democracy if you have decided to ignore accurate information in favor of alternative facts. Crazy. What is an alternative fact? Guess what? It's a lie. Okay? You are the greatest threat to American democracy if you have decided to allow people to just lie to you, and you know they're lying every day, all day. You are the greatest threat to American democracy if you are engaging in canceling people just because they have a different opinion, regardless of whether their opinion has merit or not. Now, I don't want to use the cancel culture term because it's loaded. And even that has more layers than just black and white. But we have to be able to discuss things in a way that's honest. Okay, there's tons of ugly things out there that we don't agree with. People who think ways we don't agree with. But if you don't discuss it with them, guess what? They'll always think that way. So if you label them bad or good or evil, there's no discussion to be had. We'll stay divided. Guess what? China, Russia, big tech are all the military industrial war machine. They're all looking to control your behavior, and you're just making it easy for them. You are the greatest threat to American democracy if on January 6th, you sat by and watched a violent, murderous insurrection, and you chose to sit there and make excuses. Now, this insurrection was an effort to stop the most sacred of the things that American democracy is all about, which is certifying the vote. That is the definition of insurrection. That is the definition of sedition. And yes, it was violent. When you have Molotov cocktails, live bombs, pistols, semi-automatic weapons, guess what? That's called a violent insurrection. You're constructing nooses on the Capitol steps and planning to kill Nancy Pelosi and the vice president. That's called a violent insurrection and should be punishable as such. Sedition, treason. You can't get any closer to treason than that. So you are the greatest threat to American democracy if that's okay with you. At the same token, you are also the greatest threat to American democracy if you choose to have riots because you have a cause. Unfortunately, most of those riots result in destroying the neighborhoods that you say you care about. So both things can be true, but both of you are the greatest threat to American democracy. You are the greatest threat to American democracy if you do not acknowledge that our divisions are getting larger and we are getting more willfully ignorant. Like I said, willfully means that it's a choice. You have a choice to stay in your rabbit hole, in your echo chamber, and listen to the same things over and over again. Or you can choose to peel back some layers and see what's really going on in this world, and then make some decisions. Now, as I stated earlier, every episode we are going to expose actors that are in the Matrix. And if you remember, I labeled them as the mainframes at the top.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
The managers below them, those are the ones that the mainframe use to control a big source of the population, a big grouping of the population. The mainframes are the main controllers. Then you have the agents. The agents are the small groups or the individuals that are running around here keeping you in the dark by telling you lies and also trying to find people who are trying to tell the truth and shut them down. Just like in the Matrix, the guys with the sunglasses. Yep. So, lastly, you have the rebellion. And those are the people who are trying to tell you the truth. Okay, so every episode I'm going to expose one or more of those elements of the Matrix to help us have a better understanding of who is controlling things and who is trying to keep us awake. Dare I say woke? Okay, I'm not going to say woke. So today, the Matrix operator of the day is a mainframe. This operator is none other than Google. Now, I realize Google owns this platform, but it is what it is. The whole goal is to expose the truth. So that's what I'm here to do. Now, I'm not calling Google bad or good, evil or any of that, right? The movies do that, but real life is a whole lot different. But what I am saying is that Google is one of the most efficacious controllers of your existence. Now, Google does some things that are awesome, right? They make your life way easier to navigate, more convenient. They give you some tools that you didn't earlier have, right? They make it easier to search on the online. But they also know every single thing you're doing at all times. They also use you as a source of income, as a source of bytes of information, as a source of bartering between other mainframes that they work with. And I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but conspiracies happens all the time, and this is true. This is just the way they do things. But just like in the movie The Matrix, they use you as a source of survival. In the movie The Matrix, it was just using you as a battery.
The human body generates more bioelectricity than a 120-volt battery and over 25,000 BTUs of body heat. Combined with a form of fusion, the machines had found all the energy they would ever need. There are fields now, endless fields, where human beings are no longer born. We are grown.
The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world, built to keep us under control in order to change a human being into this.
But they use you as a different type of battery. But they use you to keep things moving. There's a movie called The Circle that came out about 4 years ago with Tom Hanks. And that's a good way for you to kind of get an idea. I had a patient who worked in that space and kind of enlightened me on a lot of the things that are going on behind the scenes of the tech, where it's kind of crazy. You wouldn't believe it. Anyway, that is my 2 cents for today. If you like the content, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for hanging out with us. The next episode will involve conservatives and liberals. I'm going to leave it at that. Have a great week.